Thanks very much. So I've been elected to go first. I've got a short talk and then I'll pass over to the real experts. In a former life, I was a fellow at a college in Cambridge, and the number one question students would ask me is, so what's the secret to getting a first? There are many, I would say, but one absolute key is you need to answer the question put to you. All too often I see papers where students, perhaps because they don't know the answer, set themselves a different question and they answer that question rather than the one that the examiner has set. Those students, I used to say, will never obtain a first. So when targetjobs gave us a list of questions to answer today, you would have thought I'd take my own advice and I'd answer those questions, but I've actually set myself some slightly different questions. Thankfully, no one is officially grading my actual performance today, or at least I hope no one is. Otherwise, I'd already be ready for a second-class performance. But like so many of my past students, at least I can rest assured that I'll know the answers to the questions I'm about to go through. So my three carefully crafted questions are these. First, what's life like for a commercial law practitioner at the English bar? Which is a bit odd given my Aussie accent. Second, what's the best and the worst aspect of the profession? And finally, what are the essential skills and qualities that you will need to obtain a pupillage and then thrive at the commercial law bar? So I turn to my first question, what's life really like for a commercial law barrister? And I propose to answer this in three parts. To start in this area, and my colleagues will, I'm sure, expand on this, but generally your workload can be divided into two broad categories, advice and litigation. Advice work involves giving an opinion. So an instructing solicitor will send you a set of papers and they'll set you the background facts and they'll give you a list of questions that they want you to advise on. And then it's up to you to read the bundle, research the law, and then advise on these questions both to the solicitor and to your lay client, sometimes in writing and sometimes over a conference. However, advice only makes up a relatively small part of what you do. The most work you do involves disputed matters, which are either court proceedings, either in England or abroad, known as litigation, or a form of private alternative dispute resolution, known as arbitration. So next, when it comes specifically to commercial litigation, there are many different types of cases that will cross your desk, both in terms of content and in terms of form. Now, your core type of case, the one that you'll see the most, usually involves an alleged breach of contract where one party is suing to recover the loss that they've suffered from the other side. And these cases usually start off life with one party issuing a claim against another. But there are so many different types of commercial cases, and they differ a lot in terms of content and how they begin life. So in terms of content, the category commercial law is a broad notion and it covers a range of different legal disputes relating to contracts, torts, trusts, companies, insolvencies and construction. As to how commercial proceedings start out, a good example is commercial fraud cases. I mean, they begin life with a flurry of what's called interim applications. So you might have an injunction application where one party wants to stop another party doing something or compel them to do something. A freezing order application where one party seeks to stop another party from removing assets from England or perhaps dealing with their assets in another country. Or you might have a jurisdictional challenge where that involves one party arguing that the dispute shouldn't be heard in England at all and a foreign court should decide the dispute. Now, each of these types of applications, they're intense, they're time sensitive, and they're intellectually challenging. But, and I hope my colleagues will agree, they're all usually exciting and at least in a professional sense, they're pretty fun. Lastly, the fact that every case is different in several ways makes life for a commercial law barrister really appealing. Simply put, given the diversity of matters that you'll tend to tackle, you'll never be bored. So, although sometimes the same issues pop up, the fact pattern in all your cases is rather different. And this means that although the general themes to the story remain the same, the characters, the problems they face, and the solutions to the problems are always diverse. This, combined with the fact that very often you just simply don't know how the story is going to end, means that every case is actually quite intriguing. Also, especially in your early years, you'll work on a lot of cases independently. They'll be your matters, so it's quite rewarding because you control the strategy, you give the advice, and above all else, you undertake the advocacy. But on other matters, you'll be part of a much larger team, working with barristers who are more senior than you and very senior barristers called King's Counsel. And that means you'll obtain the thrill of working in a team, usually on a high stakes matter, and you'll have a range of different roles to fulfill. And each of them will set their own challenges. So it's this variation, at least I think, that always keeps the job interesting and challenging in equal measure. So I now move to what is, in my view at least, the best aspect of being a commercial law barrister and the worst aspect of the job, although I'm sure my colleagues may agree or differ on these points. But as to the former, for me, or at least as I've gone through my career, I've always seen advocacy as lying at the heart of the job when you're a barrister. And for me, that provides the most enjoyable aspect of the profession, and particularly if you are a predominantly commercial practitioner. So on the first day of my advocacy course, when I was an undergraduate at Melbourne, my lecturer opened by saying, "Inside every excellent advocate is a frustrated thespian." And I didn't know what he was on about back then, but I must say, he wasn't wrong. Ultimately, everything you do as a barrister, pretty much in any area, but certainly in commercial law, involves an exercise in persuading someone. Sometimes it's your client, sometimes it's a judge, and sometimes it's even someone on your own team. So whether it's in writing or orally, it takes a long time and effort to change someone's view, especially when there's a lot at stake, and it can be very exacting. However, you know this is the right job for you if, regardless of the outcome, the moment you sit down when you finish your submissions, you are completely exhausted and you can't wait to do it again. What's the worst aspect of the job then? Well, I simply can't deny that if you're a commercial law barrister, life is very unpredictable. I've said many times, it's the equivalent of a roller coaster. So if you're working on a case and some important development happens and you need to address it urgently, it just has to be done. That means that whatever else is going on in your life, you have to put it aside. For example, and the best example I think is an injunction application. These are often done on short notice and you're in court sometimes a few days after the papers come in. There's often no time to do anything beyond the work that the application requires. And that can be stressful, it can be demanding, and sometimes it can be a bit frustrating. Now it does get better over time because the more senior you become, the more control you get over your diary and the more you can manage your time better. But that said, the nature of the job means that it always remains unpredictable, even if you're a King's Counsel, because generally speaking, you can't control what the other side does. And in high-stakes commercial litigation, in particular, the parties are always strategic. And what that means is each party is always plotting to make the other side's life very difficult. So my last question concerns what are the essential skills and attributes that you will need to obtain a pupillage and to thrive at the commercial law bar. And this is, I'm sure, something that my colleagues will be able to comment on. But here's my take first. Given all the benefits of being self-employed, many people are attracted to life at the bar, especially in London. So it's very competitive these days to get a look in. And I think that level of competition heightens if you want to practice at the commercial law bar here in London, because, to put it bluntly, it's arguably the best place in the world to do it. So if Spider-Man's story taught me that with power comes great responsibility, a few years at the commercial bar taught me that with prestige comes frighteningly fierce competition. But not all is lost, because I'm going to give you my view at least on what I think are the 4 essential skills and attributes that will not only help you ensure that you'll get a pupillage in the area, but also hopefully guarantee that you'll have a successful career. So what's the first and most essential attribute that you need? Well, in my view, it's good judgment. Clients take it for granted that you will know the law well and you'll be across all the facts. But what they really want you to do is 2 things. Identify the critical points that are going to win them the case, and then present their case to the judge in the best possible light on those points. So in short, you need to be able to pick the winning points and you need to be able to persuade the judge why those points are right. The next 2 skills or attributes are probably a little more obvious. Intellectual ability and industry. You must have the stamina to put in the hours necessary to get on top of the material, but then you need to be able to analyse the material and present the key arguments in a clear and convincing way. And the last skill is good temperament. To excel at a job, you need to be able to stay, at this job in particular, you need to be able to stay objective at all times, remain calm under pressure, and have the strength of your own convictions even when time gets tough. And they do sometimes get tough. So in conclusion, those of you who will go on to practice at the commercial law bar, and I do hope that there will be many of you, you will learn all too soon that commercial court judges like one thing above all else. Now, when I first started out in my very first year, I thought that was cleverness. After a year or 2, I was convinced it was structure. I have now discovered, perhaps all too painfully, what they actually really value is brevity. So, in short, if you enjoy a little hard work, if you love making arguments on your feet, and if you don't mind never knowing what comes next, then life at the commercial bar is certainly an option worth exploring. And at the very least, a career in this area will give you the freedom to ask your own questions, whether they're the right questions to ask or not.
Thank you. Right, so I'm Charlie Thompson. I'm a 2012 call barrister from Keating Chambers. I practice in construction, energy and insurance related disputes. And much more mundanely, I was going to answer the question, why did I choose to come to the bar? Now, when I applied, I have to confess, I probably didn't know that much about what life at the bar was really like. I knew I wanted to be an advocate. I knew I wanted to be on my feet debating points with people. But I don't think I really knew anything about what in practice life was like. I probably thought I wanted to be self-employed as well, but again, until you're actually self-employed at the bar, you don't really know what that entails. So I thought what I'd tell you now is why I would choose the bar again, knowing what I do know about it now, after a few years in practice. And it's three things really. The first is the collegiate nature of the profession. We're very lucky to work in close-knit chambers where you're able to pull together with other members who are practicing in the same areas of law as you, with the same interests, in order to shape the future of your practices and to make chambers a place that you would like it to be for future tenants and pupils alike. And then it's the fact that you can sort of call on your colleagues if you've got a problem. Certainly at Keating, it's a sort of open door policy. You can go and talk to someone who's got far more experience than you and ask them about a point, ask them to help you and download their experience of that issue to you. And it's not really like that in a lot of other professions. And coming with that is the fact that unlike a lot of other walks of life, the more senior you get, you don't get farmed out into management roles when you're at the bar. You actually just end up doing more and more complex types of cases in the areas of practice that you've been involved with right from the start. Sure, the more senior you are, the more likely you are to be involved in the day-to-day administration of Chambers life. But actually, in terms of day-to-day work, you're just going to be doing more of the same, but probably more complex and far more difficult. And then, of course, you're your own boss. Now, that doesn't mean you can just do what you like whenever you like. You've got obligations to your clients, you've got deadlines and all the rest of it. But it does mean you can fit your working life around the other demands that you might have. I've got two young children at home, which is why I'm here today, to get out of the house. But you can fit your day around that life. I tend to get up early, do some work, then maybe do a bit of childcare, and do a bit more work, and then finish off and hopefully be there for bath time. It's not like that if you're in trial, of course, but it does mean that as a self-employed person, you can formulate your career and build it and practice in the way that you would like. I don't know if you've got anything to say on...
Well, no, my colleagues have summed it up all rather beautifully, and I have nothing really to add. I suppose I will add one point. A lot of what we've said about the commercial law bar could apply to any field of practice at the bar. The great joy of being self-employed, which was one of the main drivers for me personally in coming to the bar, having in a previous life worked in a government department and realised that I was ungovernable and didn't really like the kind of corporate structure and hierarchy. But that applies wherever you are at the self-employed bar. Intellectual challenge, again, could apply equally to all the areas. Having to persuade people all the time applies across it. I suppose for me what marks out the commercial law bar in particular is that it is the kind of diversity of facts and people that you come across. I think a lot of people, when they think about the commercial law bar when they're still at university, have this idea that it's really all about the cutting edge law and the Supreme Court cases that your teachers will teach you about. And yes, that's part of it, but on a day-to-day basis, it's actually all about the facts, and it's about people, and being interested in why business people do the things they do, being interested in different types of industries, because every case you get is an opportunity. I'm sure my colleagues would probably agree. It's an opportunity to learn about the industry behind the case, and that's pretty fascinating, because every sort of industry out there ends up in disputes. And so one day you might be, well, let me think about what I've been doing recently. One day you might be doing a commercial fraud case about an alleged conspiracy to steal the assets of a Ugandan bank. And then on another day, you might be working for an airline that's having a massive dispute with Boeing over some aeroplanes that it's purchased. And I think what you need really to do to succeed is to be genuinely interested in finding out about businesses and the people behind them, and what they do. So for me, that's probably the biggest draw, is the kind of diversity. But that feeds into a point that Carmine was making about the industry that you need to succeed, because the people that you're going to be acting for in this field tend to be pretty successful. They are successful business people. They're very driven. They've got where they've got through sheer hard work, and they expect nothing less of the people that they're hiring. In fact, they'll expect you to be even more industrious than them. So go into it with your eyes open in that respect. It is demanding of your time, and every day you're being held to account by some pretty serious people.
Yeah, picking up a theme that you've both raised is sort of the same issues might crop up in your work, but it is all about the different facts of each case and how interesting they are. Certainly construction work, you might be doing a case right at the junior end about the defective installation of windows in a stately home, right up to a dispute over the construction of an oil rig in Kazakhstan. I was doing a case recently about that, and the project was so large that they served 100,000 eggs every morning to the construction workforce, which I just thought was an astonishing fact about how large this whole thing was and how international it was because of the different areas from which they'd had to take their labour and their workforce. But it's just a broad range of things that you get to do, and every case has its different aspects that will interest you. I at the moment spend a lot of my time doing post-Grenfell tragedy cladding disputes, so a lot of my time is taken up with large groups of leaseholders with varying degrees of financial ability and means, varying interests in or commitment to the litigation, and different underlying interests, trying to work together with groups of them in order to repair cladding on their buildings and make sure that it's not going to go up in flames. But then on the other hand, the next week I could be working for one of the world's richest people in relation to a construction project in Qatar. So the variation in our lives is great. You have to be on top of the law, which crops up in the same ways, but with different facts and in really, really diverse scenarios. And that, I agree, is one of the defining characteristics of the sorts of areas that we work in.